I'm Julie Andrews, and this is The Sweetest Sounds, a podcast of the Rodgers and Hammerstein organization.
Hi, I'm Jeff Lunden. On this podcast, we'll be looking at Rodgers and Hammerstein's 1947 musical Allegro and its new complete recording on Masterworks Broadway, featuring Audra McDonald, Patrick Wilson, Nathan Gunn, Liz Calloway, and Judy Kuhn, among others.
Brisk, light, and merry, and like Allegro. Sing, simple, morning, and like Allegro. Don't stop whatever you do. Do something busy and new. Keep up the hullabaloo. Allegro, 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 Allegro.
In a career filled with innovation, Allegro is perhaps Rodgers and Hammerstein's most experimental musical. It was an original tale of an everyman, which played wildly with different theatrical storytelling techniques, fragments of song, a singing and speaking chorus, minimal sets which used slide projections, and lots of narrative dance. Bruce Pomahac is director of music for the Rodgers and Hammerstein organization and one of the album's producers.
It might have been the bravest thing Rodgers and Hammerstein ever did, in a career of lots of bravery.
The show was the third musical in their partnership, coming on the heels of two enormous hits, Oklahoma and Carousel, as well as the popular film State Fair. Patrick Wilson plays the lead role of Joseph Taylor Jr. on the new recording.
They were paving the way. There was no rhyme or reason to how to tell an American musical. They were forging it as they went along. That's what's so exciting.
In 1947, college student Stephen Sondheim was certainly excited and fascinated by Allegro. A protege of Oscar Hammerstein and a fledgling songwriter, Sondheim was an assistant on the original production and says it was very influential in his future career.
What was interesting was I watched a lot of very knowledgeable people put on a flop. And by flop, it was a show that didn't work the way it was intended. And it didn't work partly because it was a highly experimental show.
Allegro's 9-month Broadway run was a disappointment for Rodgers and Hammerstein, and as was typical of the time, the original cast recording on RCA Victor omitted much of the score.
A fella needs a girl to sit by his side at the end of a weary day, to sit by his side and listen to him talk and agree with the things he'll say. A fella needs a girl.
While there have been occasional productions of Allegro over the years, the show has remained something of a mystery to both musical theater aficionados and the general public, until now. Ted Chapin, president of the Rodgers and Hammerstein organization, spent 2 years creating this new recording with some of the finest artists of the contemporary musical theater.
Because Allegro is a missing piece of the puzzle of the musical theater, and because the original production is all but forgotten, I felt very clearly from the beginning that we are creating something for people to discover.
If no one shares and no one cares, where's the fun of a job well done?
For a prize you've won.
My fellow needs a home, his own kind of home, but to make his dream come true.
A fellow needs to love.
His one only love. My only love is you.
Audra McDonald and Nathan Gunn singing A Fella Needs a Girl from the new recording. The idea for Allegro was Oscar Hammerstein's. While it wasn't strictly speaking autobiographical, the librettist wanted to explore in his everyman, the Dr. Joseph Taylor Jr., the very notion of success and its emotional costs, as he told an interviewer in 1960.
I don't think it'd be accurate to say I have anything against success in itself, but there are certain things that go along with it that have a tendency to drag a man away from doing the very things that made him successful. In the case of Allegro, it's a doctor who became successful helping patients. And then he was drawn away into a practice that demanded that he play golf with a great many people, go to cocktail parties, accept appointments on hospital boards, and doing a number of things that took away from him the time he needed to exercise his calling. And that isn't just true of doctors, it's true of lawyers, it's true of librettists, too.
The deep-thinking gentlemen and ladies who keep a metropolis alive drink cocktails and mocktails every afternoon at 5.
There goes Dr. Denby, Dr. Bigby Denby. Bigby Denby, Bigby Denby.
While most of Rodgers and Hammerstein's musicals are by now established classics, at the time of their creation they were, in many ways, revolutionary. According to Ted Chapin, Oklahoma and Carousel successfully integrated song, story, and dance more than any American musicals that came before them.
So then the third one, they take those innovations and go even farther, and they decide, let's write an everyman. This was Oscar Hammerstein's idea. Let's write an everyman story of birth to death. And then they rethought that and thought, how about birth to midlife crisis? And do it in whatever way we can figure out an everyman story should be told. Taking ideas from the Greek theater, taking ideas from operetta, taking ideas from the musical theater.
1 foot, other foot, 1 foot, other foot. Now you can go wherever you want to go. 1 foot out and the other foot out. That's all you need to know. Now you
Stephen Sondheim says among Allegro's innovations was
an attempt to utilize song in a different way, to utilize it in an epic style, to utilize the chorus as the internal parts of characters, instead of just saying, hello, hello, we're here tonight, and anyone for tennis. So the sophistication of the techniques is still fairly startling.
one of the most complex sequences in Allegro takes place when Joseph Taylor Jr. goes to college and sits in a lecture hall as his professors drone on. Album co-producer Bruce Pomahac.
And as they're lecturing, he's daydreaming about this girl. The speaking chorus is speaking what's going on in his mind. The characters that are outside, like his girlfriend, in the world around him are speaking. And in that scene in particular, you really get how astonishing the musical was. I mean, what Hammerstein was doing was something that simply hadn't been done in a musical before.
All living matter proceeds from pre-existing living matter. The new form takes on the character of that from which it came.
Hazel is going to have a baby. How I envy her. That's all the news. Fondly, Jenny.
The aim of philosophy is to exhibit the universe as a rational system in the harmony of its parts.
Dear Joe, Popper is taking me to Europe. He wants me to meet new friends.
New friends? Get that, Joe? Her father wants her to find a husband.
Some lousy nobleman, perhaps.
In addition to many sophisticated sequences like this, Allegro contained a great deal of dance. It was the very first musical to have as its director its choreographer, says Ted Chapin.
Since Allegro was directed by Agnes DeMille, the choreographer, when you listen to the 20 minutes throughout the show of dance music, you feel as if whatever solution that she might feel there was a problem for would be solved in dance. And I'm not sure that that was the case, but it certainly ended up giving us an amazing assortment of fascinating dance music.
If the tune in that dance music sounds familiar, it's Rodgers and Hart's 1926 hit Mountain Greenery. Bruce Pomahac says it was used in the college sequence, which takes place in the 1920s.
Mountain Greenery really did harken back to something, and Rodgers knew that the gut of that would be stronger than if he tried to write something new. He had moved along as a composer.
As experimental as Allegro was, Ted Chapin says Rodgers and Hammerstein couldn't help but write songs that would live beyond the show.
This was Rodgers and Hammerstein in between Carousel and South Pacific. This is not two guys who lost their talent. Therefore, they knew how to write songs. So one only can wonder, in the creating of this very experimental musical, when one or the other or both of them said, let's do a song.
We have nothing to remember so far, so far, so far. We haven't walked by night and shared the light of a star. So far, your heart has never fluttered so near that my own heart alone could hear it. We haven't gone beyond the very beginning. We've just begun to know how lucky we are. So we have nothing to remember so far, so far. But now I'm face to face with you, and now at last we've met, and now we can look forward to the things we'll never forget.
Judy Kuhn singing So Far, one of those songs from Allegro that became a standard. And it isn't the only one. There was also The Gentleman is a Dope and You Were Never Away, Bruce Pomahac.
These men were songwriters in the era of what you did to survive is you wrote hit songs. That was job one. Even though Rodgers and Hammerstein changed the theater forever by insisting on going further, what they had to do is they had to come up with those hits. Allegro is where they took the biggest step away from that, and they got slapped for it. They never did it again.
The show opened at the Majestic Theater on October 10th, 1947, with a huge $750,000 advance sale and high expectations. But the critics were split right down the middle, says Ted Chapin.
Brooks Atkinson in the New York Times wrote it as a work of great beauty and purity, and explained the lyric rapture of a musical masterpiece, while George Jean Nathan in the Journal American called it as pretentious as artificial jewelry and just about as valuable.
Poor Joe, the older you grow, the harder it is to know what to think, what to do, where to go.
As the run went on, audiences dwindled, and by July 1948, Allegro closed. A 16-city national tour didn't do much better. Both writers were disappointed by the reaction. Richard Rodgers.
If you're reasonably rational and have any objectivity, you know that after you've had Oklahoma State Fair and Carousel in a row, this is a very good time to be cautious. This is when it's liable to sneak up from behind and hit you on the back of the head.
Oscar Hammerstein.
It was not a big success, and certainly not to measure up to the other plays that Dick and I have written. But it's the only play that was not a big success that I have any loyalty toward and any desire to produce again and perhaps rewrite.
Ted Chapin.
And in fact, when Oscar Hammerstein died 6 months after The Sound of Music opened on Broadway, he was writing a television version of Allegro.
It had long been Ted Chapin's dream to preserve the complete score of Allegro on a recording, and in 2006 he began to make that dream come true. Conductor Larry Blank and a team from the Rodgers and Hammerstein organization flew to Slovakia to work with the Astropolis Philharmonic Orchestra in Bratislava.
Because it's so complicated and because there were so many decisions that we couldn't have made up front if we tried, we started by laying down the orchestra tracks and going to Bratislava because, colleagues of ours had said, you can get a lot of time with this orchestra.
They spent 4 days in Bratislava recording the orchestra tracks, then returned to New York and recorded the choral parts.
Ring out, all bells of joy, and all the ships at sea ahoy. The doctor's wife has a bouncing boy, Joseph Taylor Jr.
Then Chapin, Pomahac, and co-producer David Lai brainstormed about assembling their dream cast.
In a perfect world, we created this cast, and then we simply went out and got them, and we got them all.
To play Grandma, they asked Marni Nixon, who famously dubbed voices for stars in big Hollywood musicals. Deborah Carr in The King and I, Audrey Hepburn in My Fair Lady, Natalie Wood in West Side Story.
The first person that we recorded was Marni Nixon playing Grandma. And I think we all felt that Marni Nixon being the famous voice of so many movies, and she's such a well-schooled musician that now, even though she's in her 70s, there's a voice there. It's just the voice of an older woman, which is exactly what Grandma needs to be.
Starting out so foolishly small, it's hard to believe you will grow at all. It's hard to believe that like you can ever turn out to be men, but I've seen it happen before, so I know it can happen again.
All the singers laid down their vocals to the pre-recorded orchestral tracks conducted by Larry Blank. Bruce Pomahac says, despite the upside-down process, the result turned out to be extremely musical.
When you listen to Liz Callaway doing The Gentleman is a Dope, you feel as if Larry is right there in the room with the orchestra conducting all of the nuance of their rubatos and everything, and it was just the other way around. Larry had to approximate in his head without ever having heard. At that point, we didn't know who was going to be singing these songs. Approximate the musical reality of it, the emotional musical expression, and then the singers had to come in and perform that.
The gentleman is a dope, a man of many faults, a clumsy Joe who wouldn't know a rumba from a waltz. The gentleman is a dope, and not my cup of tea. Why do I get in a dither? He doesn't belong to me. The gentleman isn't bright, he doesn't know the score. A cake will come, he'll take a crumb and never ask for more. The gentleman's eyes are blue, but little do they see. Why am I beating my brains out? He doesn't belong to me.
Liz Callaway, singing Allegro's best-known song, The Gentleman is a Dope. She's one of the many Broadway veterans who perform on the album, like Patrick Wilson. He's played 2 Rodgers and Hammerstein leads, Billy Bigelow on the national tour of Carousel, and Curly in Oklahoma on Broadway. He was in Canada working on a film when he got a call from Ted Chapin about playing the leading role, Joseph Taylor Jr., in Allegro.
He said, so I'm putting together this Allegro recording. And I said, I think it was like October. And I said, I am in Vancouver until February. And he said, we can wait. There's no timetable. I want to do this the right way. And we're putting together all these great artists. And you are the guy that I want to do this. He said, we'll just wait. I said, well, if you'll wait, I'm happy to do it. So I'll call you when I get back in town.
You are never away from your home in my heart. There is never a day when you don't play a part in a word that I say or a sight that I see. You are never away, and I'll never
The cast also includes Norbert Leo Butz, Laura Benanti, and Audra McDonald as Marjorie Taylor, Joe's mother.
She sang Come Home, which is, for argument's sake, the Climb Every Mountain of Allegro. And she listened to the orchestra, and she did a recording, and it was absolutely lovely. And she turned to Bruce and said, I just feel like I'm being a good girl. Can't I just loosen up? And, of course, Bruce said, absolutely. And the take that's on this record was her just owning it.
You know you're back where there's work to do, where there's love for you.
Audra McDonald singing Come Home. Many other people make cameo appearances on the album, including original production assistant Stephen Sondheim.
And we felt that doing this project, just to have a couple of voices that just had a little more oomph to them, would be good. And I have to say, I think it came out wonderful.
And we were so lucky to have Stephen Sondheim to do that final ornament speech.
Ornament. A man's brain is sometimes cleared by the sudden light of one word. In the flash of a split second, he sees a signpost pointing down a new road, and he may take a new turning that will affect the rest of his life. The split second is over.
Album co-producer Bruce Pomahac says he's proud of the recording and how it presents this little-known musical.
If it's going to live, people have to know what it is. And I think it may not end up being your favorite musical, but once you've listened to it, there will have been nothing like it that you ever really heard. And that's the excitement about Allegro.
And, Ted Chapin adds, the new recording helps complete a missing chapter of musical theater history.
And as you listen to it and realize there would not have been West Side Story, there would not have been Company, there would not have been Sweeney Todd, there would not have been Chorus Line without Allegro. And that's not my opinion. That's what all the people who created those musicals after this kept saying for years.
The complete recording of Allegro is now available on Masterworks Broadway. The show is available for performance from R&H Theatricals, and vocal selections are published by Williamson Music, Hal Leonard. For more information, go to feature.masterworksbroadway.com/Allegro or rnh.com. I'm Jeff Lunden.
This has been The Sweetest Sounds, a podcast of the Rodgers and Hammerstein organization. I'm Julie Andrews. Thank you for listening.